The Cipher of Oblivion, the key beneath the genome. Sorana stood in the dark, sterile chamber, her reflection barely visible in the burnished black glass before her. The light from the monitors cast her face in hollow blue, accentuating the deep lines etched beneath her eyes. She hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. Sleep was meaningless now. Beyond the reinforced glass, the thing on the table writhed. It had once been a man. Now it was becoming something else. Sorana watched, impassive, as the subject's body spasmed, muscles tearing under the strain of unnatural growth. His chest heaved violently, ribs fracturing outward like petals unfurling, skin stretched thin over shifting organs that should not move. The sound in the room was clinical, monitor pings, the faint wheeze of the filtration system, but beneath that, Sorana could hear something else. A low, rhythmic vibration, almost like breathing or weeping. The Cipher was waking. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to ignore the sweat on her palms, the static crawling at the back of her skull. This was the only way. Her gaze drifted to the data streams spiraling across the main monitor, lines of genetic code, fractal diagrams of protein chains twisting in impossible configurations. She had traced these patterns for years, peeling back layers of biological noise until the structure emerged. The human genome wasn't random, it wasn't natural. It was a lock. A prison forged by desperate hands in a forgotten age, encoded in the blood of every living human. The knowledge had ruined her. The technocracy hadn't listened, of course. They had laughed behind their perfect teeth, their white coats, their sterile glass towers, dismissed her as obsessive, dangerous, a liability to order. They hadn't seen what she had seen. The truth had come to her not in theory, but in nightmare. Visions dredged from somewhere deeper than thought, flickers of something buried in the collective unconscious, etched in the marrow of the species. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she was there again. A city of impossible geometry, burning under a bruised violet sky. Beneath her feet, the earth pulsed. Not rock, not soil, but living tissue. Veins stretched like rivers across the horizon, black ichor pumping beneath a membrane of land. Above, the sky trembled as it split open. Sorana's breath hitched as the memories swelled, seizing her. She saw them, the architects of the encryption. Not gods, not even human, something other. Gaunt, eyeless figures gathered around a spire of bone and metal, their limbs elongated, their mouths stitched shut. The sky above them hemorrhaged starlight as they carved their own bodies open, wiring strands of their own flesh into machines that pulsed with ancient mathematics. They had not built the Cipher to protect themselves. They had built it to protect everything else. Because something was coming. Something outside. A primordial intelligence that did not think or want, but only devoured. It had already consumed entire realities before the architects bound a fragment of it inside the genome of the last surviving species they could shape. Humanity. Their final desperate gambit. Sorana had uncovered the remnants of their existence buried in deep-sea fossil beds, in cave etchings so old they predated language, in genetic anomalies written off as statistical noise. The lock had endured for eons. But nothing lasts forever. The technocracy's relentless genetic engineering, their optimization programs, their sterilization of disorder, had eroded the Cipher without knowing it. Piece by piece, they had streamlined and improved the human genome, grinding away at the encryption like rust on ancient chains. It was cracking, and the thing inside was stirring. Sorana had known. The moment she saw the first wave of catastrophic genome collapses in isolated districts, what was happening? The pattern was clear. It was a countdown. She tried to warn them. They branded her unstable, shut her out, cut her access. So she did what they would not. She built the key, a virus, a tailored vector that would awaken the Cipher in every living human, force the genome to decrypt itself, drag the truth screaming into the light. It would burn millions, maybe billions. But if she didn't act, if she left the cipher to erode on its own, humanity wouldn't die screaming. They would simply cease to exist, swallowed whole by something that had no name. A soft, wet crack pulled her back to the present. The subject on the table had stopped thrashing. Its chest had collapsed inward, bones fused into an alien lattice. Black, glistening tendrils protruded from the broken flesh, twitching feebly in the cold air. Its eyes, what was left of them, were open, fixed on her. Serana met its gaze without flinching. The thing on the table whispered, voice ragged and layered with something deeper. "Thank you." She did not respond. Instead, she turned to the console and entered the final sequence. The viral key dispersed quietly through the technocracy's central neural net, invisible, undetectable, piggybacking on routine biometric updates. It would reach every citizen within the hour. The screen flashed green. Dispersal complete. Serana exhaled, her breath fogging the glass. The weight in her chest eased just a fraction. The burden was no longer hers alone. Chapter 1. The Fracture Beneath the Skin. Part 1. Dr. Elena Kadir's mornings had always begun the same way. Sterile, mechanical, meaningless. The lights in the central genomics facility blinked on at exactly 0600 hours, casting a cold white glow across the reinforced concrete walls. Somewhere, deep in the server towers of the Helix Technocracy's Ministry of Genetic Integrity, an algorithm decided when every citizen of Prime City would wake, work, eat, and sleep. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't kindness. It was simply order. Elena sat upright in her narrow cot before the second chime even sounded. Muscle memory. Conditioning. Her quarters were immaculate. One steel desk, one cot, one opaque window overlooking nothing but the grey lattice of the city's outer district towers. She washed her face mechanically, staring into her reflection. Deep lines pulled at her mouth. Her hair, jet black and tightly bound, framed tired, hollow eyes. There was a subtle twitch at the corner of her jaw, a tremor she hadn't been able to rid herself of since the day she'd been promoted to senior genomic overseer. By 0630, she was seated at her station in Sector D of the genomics hub, the neural interface clipped neatly behind her ear, data streams scrolling before her eyes in silence. The genome of humanity, mapped, monitored, sterile. It was supposed to be beautiful. It was supposed to be perfect. But today, it wasn't. Her eyes lingered on an anomaly highlighted in amber. A small, isolated genetic deviation flagged in one of the outer districts. It was subtle, just a ripple in the protein folding pattern. Statistically negligible. She almost cleared the alert without thinking. Then she saw it. Beneath the deviation, woven between harmless nucleotides, there was something else. A structure? No, not a structure. A pattern. Her stomach tightened as she zoomed in on the data. It was fractal, recursive. The anomaly repeated itself across different chromosomes, scaling up and down in complexity. She recognized its shape without knowing how. It looked like a key. Her heart began to pound, a strange, cold pressure building behind her sternum. The interface pinged. A priority incident alert. Location, Isolation Ward C, Genomics Sector D. Her blood ran cold when she saw the name in the report. Danton Rees. Technician, her junior. She had spoken to him yesterday, over synthetic tea in the sterile cafeteria, about nothing. Protocol updates, archive reorganizations, meaningless chatter. He had been fine. Now he was in isolation. Status, critical. Genetic instability detected, neurological collapse, structural failure pending. Eleanor pushed back from her console without thinking, grabbing her coat and tablet. The overhead lights seemed too bright, the hallway too quiet as she moved quickly past other researchers who barely registered her passing. Everything felt brittle, like glass about to crack. She keyed open the secured door to the isolation ward and stepped inside. The antiseptic smell hit her first, clinical, sharp, almost metallic. The observation bay was small, cold, stripped of unnecessary furnishings. Only the gurney remained, bolted to the floor, restraints pulled taut over the thrashing figure of Danton Rees. He was convulsing violently, muscles seizing, jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to snap. His skin was drenched in sweat, veins livid against his pale flesh. His eyes rolled in their sockets, showing mostly white. Nurse Hale and Dr. Renaud stood at the far wall, both pale and grim. "What happened?" Elena asked quietly, her voice sounding thin in the sterile air. Renaud shook his head. "He collapsed in the archives an hour ago. Seizures, loss of cognitive function. Then the vitals. They're impossible. His genome is disintegrating." Elena approached the bedside slowly, her hands cold and clammy. Danton's breath rattled wetly in his throat. His body jerked beneath the restraints, slick with sweat and something else. Black ichor seeping from the corners of his mouth. His eyes flicked open when she leaned over him. For a moment, they focused. "Elena," he rasped. His voice was broken, wet, layered with something deeper. She swallowed. "I'm here." His lips trembled, then peeled back over his teeth in a grimace of terror. "It's inside, burning. Make it stop." Then he screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It came from somewhere deep, resonant, like a note plucked from the void. Beneath his skin, something moved. Nurse Hale flinched back. Renaud cursed, fumbling for a sedative. Elena couldn't move. The veins beneath Danton's skin bulged unnaturally, crawling over his arms and chest like black vines. His ribcage rose and fell erratically, the shape of it warping beneath the flesh. The heart monitor flatlined. Danton's body arched violently, a wet, splintering crack filling the room. His sternum split open. Chapter 1. The Fracture Beneath the Skin, Part 2. Danton's chest cracked apart like brittle porcelain, his ribs splaying outward in sharp, jagged arcs. Slick, black ichor poured from the cavity, steaming in the sterile air. Beneath the shattered bone, his organs writhed unnaturally, as if something else was moving beneath them, puppeteering them. Nurse Hale screamed. Dr. Renaud stumbled back, knocking over a tray of instruments. Elena stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat, eyes locked on the impossible tableau. Danton's heart was still beating, grotesquely enlarged, pumping black fluid through twisted, malformed arteries. But something had grown behind it, an appendage, glistening and tubular, unfurling like a wet blossom from his chest cavity. The thing twitched, tasting the air with flailing cilia. Danton's mouth opened, jaw dislocating unnaturally, his voice emerging in a fractured, wet gurgle. "Elena, please." It wasn't entirely human. The sound layered over itself, like two voices speaking in unison, one terrified, the other hungry. Eleanor's legs nearly gave out. She backed away until she hit the wall, her pulse thundering in her ears. Nurse Hale scrambled toward the door, but Danton's body moved faster. His remaining limbs convulsed violently, restraints snapping one by one with wet pops. His hands shot outward, grabbing Hale by the ankle. The nurse screamed as the thing that had once been Danton pulled her toward him, the black fluid coating his fingers. His ribs flexed, bone tips bending inward like claws. Dr. Renaud lunged forward, trying to pull her free. Elena moved without thinking, grabbing a metal tray from the floor and hurling it at Danton's face. It bounced harmlessly off his temple, but the distraction was enough. Hale tore her leg free, scrambling backward. The thing in Danton's chest unfurled further, elongating grotesquely, stretching toward Elena. It whispered her name again, distorted. Elena! Elena! Security burst through the door. Flamethrowers. They didn't hesitate. Fire roared, the smell of scorched flesh filling the isolation ward. Danton's body thrashed one last time, the thing in his chest emitting an unearthly shriek before collapsing inward. The flames consumed everything, bone, muscle, ichor, until there was nothing left but charred ruin. The silence afterward was deafening. Elena stood motionless, staring at the blackened gurney. Her ears rang. Her hands shook. She felt like something fundamental had cracked inside her. Dr. Renaud slumped against the wall, head in his hands. Nurse Hales sobbed quietly in the corner, her face streaked with soot. The security officers left without a word. Protocol. E? They called the event a containment breach. Elena called it something else. She spent the next 12 hours in the command center, combing through biometric data, incident logs, neural network traffic. She ignored the tremor in her hands, the taste of ash in her mouth, the hollow ache behind her eyes. The anomalies weren't isolated. They were everywhere. Genomic data from across the city showed the same fractal deviation she had seen in Danton. Small at first, then escalating rapidly. Reports streamed in from the outer districts. Seizures, neurological collapse, physical transformations. Casualties mounting by the hour. The high researcher's voice echoed in her ear as the emergency broadcast repeated. Species-wide genomic destabilization detected. All affected subjects to be terminated. Sacrifices authorized. Probability of containment, 68% and falling. Eleanor sat at her console, numb. The world was unraveling. And she knew, deep in her marrow, that this wasn't a pathogen. It wasn't a mutation. It wasn't an accident. It was a message, buried in the genome itself. And someone had just pressed the key. Chapter 2, Sacrificial Protocols. The Helix Technocracy's response was, as always, clinical. By the following day, the population grid lit up with crimson markers. Each mark represented an infected citizen. Thousands at first, then tens of thousands, then entire sectors engulfed in the spreading genomic collapse. The command center floor in Sector D was a landscape of controlled chaos. White-coated personnel moved briskly between consoles, eyes glazed by exhaustion, and terror suppressed beneath years of social conditioning. On the main display, the Central Surveillance Network's predictive algorithms played out endless simulations of the unfolding catastrophe. Projected casualties, 2.9 million. Containment probability, 22%. Species extinction likelihood, 64%. Elena stood in the center of it, watching the numbers tick upward, her stomach hollow. The high researcher's voice continued issuing cold, emotionless orders across every channel. Sacrificial Protocol Theta initiated. All bioengineered response teams authorized to terminate destabilized units. Population sector quarantines in effect. Obedience is survival. Outside the glass windows of the command center, black smoke curled over the skyline. The horizon shimmered with controlled burn zones, whole districts systematically reduced to ash. The people of Prime City did not riot. They had been trained for centuries to submit, to obey. Most of them died without ever knowing why. Somewhere beneath the surface, in biolaboratories buried miles below, technicians worked around the clock, dissecting the remains of the infected. Their reports streamed upward to the high researcher's core. Structural genetic failure, present in all cases. Genomic architecture displaying non-human fractal sequences. Emergent cognitive patterns embedded in neural tissue post-mortem. Transmissions detected at frequencies beyond human auditory capacity. The analysis was clear. The infection wasn't viral. It wasn't biological. It was encoded. A broadcast of some kind, but not electromagnetic. A signal buried within the genome itself. a recursive algorithm designed to overwrite biological reality. Elena sat alone in the isolation of her data chamber when the first external intelligence reports came in. Across the off-world colonies, the same anomalies had begun. On Station Pelion above the methane seas of Luther Prime, a mining crew had collapsed in unison, their bodies splitting open in perfect symmetry, emerging fused into a single shrieking mass of bone and muscle. On the frozen colony of New Voltaire, an entire agricultural sector had torn itself apart in a single night, citizens mutating into towering, eyeless things that moved as one, whispering the same phrase over and over in voices that weren't their own. The cage is broken. By week's end, 43 worlds had gone dark. But it wasn't until the decrypted signal fragment arrived from deep within the technocracy's data vaults that Elena understood the true scale. It was a partial genetic sequence, buried deep in the historical archives, labeled as noise data from an ancient expedition to the pre-collapse Earth ruins. The sequence matched the pattern in Danton's genome. Not similar, identical. Elena's stomach flipped. She opened the accompanying file logs, hands trembling. The expedition notes were fragmented, but one phrase repeated again and again. Encoded lock discovered in human genome. Source unknown. Potential containment system. Pattern resembles recursive inhibition of higher dimensional incursion. The document's final line burned into her vision. Decryption inadvisable. Catastrophic outcome projected. It was too late. Elena looked back at the current casualty estimates. Over 200 million dead or mutated. The technocracy was collapsing in slow motion. And in the silence of her personal terminal, something flickered. A file she had never accessed, hidden in the neural archive's deepest layer. A name attached, Serana. The encryption key that had been broadcast across every citizen's genome. The woman they had called a terrorist, a heretic, a traitor to the species. The woman who had opened the lock. Chapter 3, The Architects and the Chain of Flesh. It began long before there were names, long before the Helix technocracy, before Earth, before language, before even the stars took their current shape. It began in the forgotten dark, in a universe that was not this one. Serana dreamed of it nightly, whether she wished to or not. She saw it again now, the flashback screaming through her fragmented consciousness as she drifted in neural fugue, hiding in the wastelands beneath the technocracy's burning spires. Her work already done, her virus already spread. The vision was always the same. A sky torn open like wet paper. A world, not human, not even animal, something else entirely, its surface alive and undulating like muscle beneath skin, cities of impossible angles rising and falling as if breathing, and in the distance, something descending. The Oblivion choir, not creatures, not even gods. A logic, alive, hungry, transcendent, singing existence apart. Serana's ancestors, not hers, but the genetic architects whose fingerprints were woven into humanity's code, had fought it as best they could. Their forms were mutable, vast, biomechanical and organic, long since abandoned their original shapes. They wielded worlds like weapons. They burned entire solar systems as offerings to delay the choir. It hadn't mattered. The choir's song could not be stopped. It consumed not just life, but meaning itself. Entire civilizations were erased from memory, their histories unmade retroactively, leaving only a ripple in the void where once galaxies had spun. The architects' final act had been desperation. They carved their own bodies open, splitting their genomic matrices, folding the algorithms of existence into strands of flesh and data. They wove themselves into the genome of a primitive, irrelevant species. Brittle bipeds they found scuttling in the ruins of one of the last safe worlds. Humans. The architects used their own dying neural engines to encode an encryption so complex that even the choir could not sing through it. A recursive lock, fractal, self-replicating, buried in every strand of human DNA. A cage, not to protect humanity, but to contain the last fragment of the choir. Because they couldn't destroy it. They could only bind it. The cost had been everything. In her fugue, Serana saw the final sacrifice again. The architects gathered on the living spire of their last world, their own bodies wired into the structure, veins and nerves stretched across miles of flesh-metal lattice. Their cities lay beneath them, abandoned, sacrificed. The sky above rippled like liquid glass, folding inward, black holes blooming like tumors. The architects sang a single final note, a lock, a scream, a prayer, as they fed their own realities into the cipher. Then they were gone. All that remained was the chain they left behind, humanity. A species bred not to inherit the universe, but to hold back Oblivion. And now the lock was failing. Serana woke with a start, breath ragged, the weight of eons crushing her chest. She remembered the look in the eyes of her first test subject, right before he died, right before his genome unfolded like a chrysalis, revealing something that should never have existed. That same choir fractal had been singing behind his eyes. Serana stood, brushing dust from her coat, the firelight of the collapsing technocracy flickering against the sky beyond the wastelands. It was too late to stop what she had done. All she could do now was finish it. Chapter 4. The choir awakens. The sirens never stopped. For 3 days, the sky over Prime City burned, smoke choking out the brittle sunlight. The red emergency bands scrawled endlessly across every screen, every device, every neural HUD. Genomic cascade event in progress. Sacrificial protocols in effect. Compliance is survival. Elena hadn't slept in 72 hours. Her hands trembled. Her mouth tasted of copper and ash. The containment teams had stopped using clinical language by day 2. Now they simply called it what it was: the collapse. Whole sectors of the city emptied overnight. Some were burned clean, block by block, human-shaped shadows seared into concrete. Others changed. Elena watched live feeds, helpless, as the infected gathered in pulsing masses, their bodies merged into obscene shapes, limbs sprouting from torsos, teeth lining their arms, mouths opening in places that should not have mouths. They moved as one. A network without wires, a single terrible song on their lips. The cage is broken. The cage is broken. The words poured from them like blood. The high researcher had gone silent after the 3rd day. No more announcements, no more protocols. The system was dead. Eleanor sat alone in the command center, lights flickering overhead, the walls stained with soot. Most of the staff had evacuated. Those who hadn't were either dead or worse. The final transmission from the off-world colonies scrolled across her screen. New Voltaire, lost. Luther Prime, lost. Station Pelion, lost. The outer worlds were gone. There would be no reinforcements, no salvation. A soft chime pulled her attention. A new file had appeared in her private neural channel, untraceable, unlogged. It bore a single name: Serana. Elena's blood turned to ice. She opened the file. Inside was a recorded message, old and fractured, encoded deep beneath the technocracy's firewalls. Serana's voice was calm, detached. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. You think this is a contagion? It isn't. It's a correction. The cipher was never meant to protect you. You were the lock. And I broke it! The choir is singing again. It's not death that's coming, it's unmaking. The message ended in static. Elena sat frozen, the weight of it crushing her lungs. Outside the observation windows, the city shuddered as something vast stirred beneath the skyline. An undulating mass of fused flesh, a choir of screaming mouths, their song rippling across the neural net. She knew then with hollow certainty. There was no containment. There was no cure. The cipher had been unlocked, and the universe was listening. Chapter 5. The chain unravels. The helix technocracy fell in silence. Not with rebellion, not with war, but with the soft, wet sound of flesh unmaking itself. Across Prime City, towers collapsed as their inhabitants twisted and merged, their bodies stripped of coherent form. The outer sectors became thickets of bone and sinew, buildings swallowed by lattices of living tissue pulsing in time with an unseen pulse. The few remaining biomonitors recorded the same pattern in every infected neural scan. A signal. Recursive, fractal, self-replicating. The Cipher's song. It was no longer localized. Off-world satellites picked up echoes of the transmission radiating outward. Not radio waves, not data. Something deeper, something that rode the genetic substructure of every living thing. Even beyond human colonies, the gene-encoded signal began to resonate in other species. Flora, fauna, artificial biosystems. The choir was not human. It had never been, and now it no longer needed its cage. Eleanor stood at the edge of the wastelands, breathing the ash-laden air, her neural interface crackling with the static chorus of the fallen city behind her. She had no orders left to follow, no containment teams, no technocracy. She only had the file Sorana had left her, the truth it contained burning behind her eyes. The human genome had never been an achievement. It had been a prison wall. The choir's song had been buried there, waiting, chained by ancient hands long forgotten. And Sorana, the heretic, the terrorist, the architect of this apocalypse, had simply opened the door. Elena looked out across the horizon. In the distance, the Earth itself shifted, a ridge of fused bodies miles wide, rippling like muscle beneath skin, breathing in sync. The sky above was no longer blue. It pulsed faintly green, the stars bending at impossible angles, constellations rearranged by something watching from beyond. The universe was unraveling, not in fire, but in correction. Sorana's final log, encrypted record, recovered fragment. They will curse my name. They will call me monster, butcher, traitor. But I saw it. I saw what lay beyond the cage. It was never about survival. It was about the lie we told ourselves to stave off the void. I didn't do this to kill them. I did this to wake them up. There is no God, no order, no future. There is only the choir. And now, finally, they can hear it. The Cipher of Oblivion. Chapter 2. The Choir's Garden, Part 2. The creature stepped forward, slow and deliberate, the meat of its bare feet squelching wetly against the living ground. Elena took an involuntary step back. The thing's smile widened, skin splitting faintly at the edges of its lips, revealing the slick movement of something coiled beneath. When it spoke, its voice was too warm, too human. Elena Kadir, it purred. You've come far. She swallowed hard, her pulse roaring behind her eyes. The thing knew her name. What are you? She rasped, her throat dry and burning. The creature tilted its head as if confused by the question. I'm what we all are now, it said. I heard the song first. I let it in. It spread its arms wide, motioning to the horizon, to the undulating skyline, to the towers blooming with bone flowers and eyes, to the twitching tree of flesh at the garden's center. We are what was always meant to be. Elena's stomach twisted. You were technocracy, she said flatly. You were human. The thing's expression faltered, just for a moment. Then it laughed, a sound too joyful, too easy, cutting against the backdrop of horror. Humanity was a cage, a shell. The choir cracked it open. It took another step forward. "We can show you." She backed away, hand reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. The thing's smile never wavered. "You don't have to run," it said gently. "You don't have to hurt anymore. It's beautiful. It's warm." Its voice began to ripple, multiple layers now, male and female, child and elder, all speaking in harmony. "Let go." Elena's breath caught. The song crawled behind her eyes again, tempting. For a moment she saw herself stepping forward, arms open, falling into the flesh basin, her skin unraveling into threads, merging with the others. No more fear, no more responsibility, just bliss. She bit the inside of her cheek hard, tasting blood. The vision shattered. "No," she hissed through gritted teeth. The thing blinked slowly. "You'll see," it murmured, "when you're tired of being afraid." It turned, walking back toward the basin. As it moved, its spine unfolded, vertebrae peeling outward like insect wings, flexing in time with the song. The tree of flesh pulsed once more. "The cage is broken." Elena staggered away, her ears ringing, hands trembling uncontrollably. She needed to get to the next coordinates. She needed to understand what Sorana had done. Because if this was only the beginning, then the end would be worse. Much worse. End of Chapter 2. If you're ready, reply continue, and I will immediately proceed to Chapter 3. Sacrificial Bliss. Shall I proceed? Chapter 2. Part 2. The Choir's Garden. Part 2. The creature stepped forward, slow and deliberate, the meat of its bare feet squelching wetly against the living ground. Elena took an involuntary step back. The thing's smile widened, skin splitting faintly at the edges of its lips, revealing the slick movement of something coiled beneath. When it spoke, its voice was too warm, too human. "Elena Kadir," it purred. "You've come far." She swallowed hard, her pulse roaring behind her eyes. The thing knew her name. "What are you?" she rasped, her throat dry and burning. The creature tilted its head, as if confused by the question. "I'm what we all are now," it said. "I heard the song first. I let it in." It spread its arms wide, motioning to the horizon, to the undulating skyline, to the towers blooming with bone flowers and eyes, to the twitching tree of flesh at the garden's center. "We are what was always meant to be." Elena's stomach twisted. "You were technocracy," she said flatly. "You were human." The thing's expression faltered, just for a moment. Then it laughed. A sound too joyful, too easy, cutting against the backdrop of horror. Humanity was a cage, a shell. The choir cracked it open. It took another step forward. "We can show you." She backed away, hand reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. The thing's smile never wavered. "You don't have to run," it said gently. "You don't have to hurt anymore. It's beautiful. It's warm." Its voice began to ripple. Multiple layers now, male and female, child and elder, all speaking in harmony. "Let go." Elena's breath caught. The song crawled behind her eyes again, tempting. For a moment, she saw herself stepping forward, arms open, falling into the flesh basin, her skin unraveling into threads, merging with the others. No more fear, no more responsibility, just bliss. She bit the inside of her cheek hard, tasting blood. The vision shattered. "No," she hissed through gritted teeth. The thing blinked slowly. "You'll see," it murmured, "when you're tired of being afraid." It turned, walking back toward the basin. As it moved, its spine unfolded, vertebrae peeling outward like insect wings, flexing in time with the song. The tree of flesh pulsed once more. "The cage is broken." Elena staggered away, her ears ringing, hands trembling uncontrollably. She needed to get to the next coordinates. She needed to understand what Sorana had done, because if this was only the beginning, then the end would be worse, much worse. Chapter 3: Sacrificial Bliss, Part 1. The outskirts of Prime City no longer existed on any map. Where once grey lattice megastructures sprawled in sterile lines across the horizon, there now lay a valley of flesh, smooth, undulating pink-grey tissue stretching for miles, stitched together from thousands of bodies. Elena moved cautiously, breath shallow behind her damaged filter mask, every step sinking slightly into the slick, warm surface beneath her feet. The sky above was broken, no longer blue but bruised green, shot through with thin red veins of light that pulsed faintly with the rhythm of the choir's song. Somewhere beneath the tissue beneath her feet, she could feel a heartbeat. The land itself was breathing. Sorana's encoded message still pinged faintly in her neural feed. "You must see them," the ones who chose. Elena knew she was close. The data packet had embedded itself directly into her nervous system, bypassing all her neural security. She had tried to wipe it, tried to isolate the file, but it was impossible. It was in her blood now. She crested a rise and stopped cold. Below her, spread across the valley, a congregation of the blissed. Thousands of them, their bodies no longer fully human, torsos elongated, limbs fused together in spiraling patterns, faces smoothed away, mouths open and humming the song. They danced. A slow, writhing, undulating motion, a mass of flesh moving like one organism, their bodies sliding against one another, fusing and unfusing with every motion. Above them, towering over the congregation, stood a structure, an inverted spire grown from bone and tendon, its apex anchored into the earth's pulsating flesh. From its base, black fluid poured down into the crowd, and they drank it eagerly, weeping in ecstasy as they did. Their song rose higher, euphoric, terrifying. "We are undone. We are free. We are whole." Elena's stomach churned violently. She had seen horrors in the collapse of Prime City, bodies breaking, mutations blossoming like tumors. But this was willing. These people had not been forced. They had chosen the song. Chapter 3: Sacrificial Bliss, Part 2. Elena crouched low behind the ridge, trying to steady her breathing, but the song slithered beneath her skin like an itch she could not reach. She watched them, the blissed, moving in perfect rhythm, their limbs weaving together, separating, reforming. They looked nothing like the people they had once been. Some were barely bipedal, their spines stretched into arches, mouths split open down their torsos. Others had merged permanently, flesh fused at the shoulder, at the thigh, sharing a single pulsing heart. They danced around the inverted spire, their voices lifting higher, fracturing into impossible harmonies. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. Her fingers twitched involuntarily in time with the song. A hand touched her shoulder. She spun, stumbling back instinctively, reaching for a weapon she didn't have. The figure before her was small, a child, or something that had once been a child. Its body was slender, limbs elongated slightly too far, eyes too large, mouth too wide. But it smiled. "You don't have to hide," it whispered, voice layered like silk on steel. "The bliss welcomes all." The child stepped forward, offering its hand. "You're one of us. You always were." Elena staggered back, shaking her head violently. "No," she breathed. "No, I'm not." The child's smile faltered, twisting into something sad and monstrous. "You can't hear it yet," it murmured. "But you will." The congregation below turned then, as if on cue, thousands of eyes, or where eyes had once been, shifting toward her. Their song shifted, not hostile, not angry, inviting. Join us! Elena ran. The song followed her, vibrating in her bones, her blood, her teeth. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs nearly gave out, until the bliss were far behind, their song fading into the choking air. But even then it lingered, soft and sweet beneath her skull. At the next ridge, she collapsed to her knees, gasping, fighting back the urge to weep. Sorana's final coordinates flickered faintly in her retinal display. The cradle, beneath the ash, the blood, the flesh, and the song. The true horror waited. Chapter 4. The Architect's Grave, Part 1. The wastelands beyond Prime City stretched for miles, a lifeless expanse of black sand, ash, and bone. Here, the Cipher's song was quieter, muffled beneath the weight of distance and ruin. Eleanor's breath came in ragged bursts as she trudged across the broken terrain, each step leaving a shallow imprint in the brittle soil. Her body ached in ways she couldn't name. Her skin felt thinner, her bones brittle, her muscles moving half a second slower than they should. She knew the signs. The Cipher was inside her now. The transformation had begun. The coordinates Sorana left her led to an outcrop of jagged rock at the edge of a shallow crater, half swallowed by the earth. It took her hours to find the entrance, buried beneath collapsed debris and strands of petrified sinew. A rusted technocracy sigil marked the threshold, the entrance to one of the deep archives, subterranean vaults abandoned centuries ago, sealed off after the first genetic integrity war. No one had been here in generations, no one but Sorana. Inside, the air was thin and cold, the sterile tang of oxidized metal mixing with the faint, sweet rot of something long dead. Emergency lights flickered weakly overhead, casting shadows that seemed to stretch too far. Elena moved carefully, following the faint pulse of her neural map, until she reached the core chamber. A vast circular vault, lined with ancient servers embedded in the walls, their faces carved with sigils she didn't recognize. Alien, geometric, recursive. In the center of the room lay the heart of the archive. A massive petrified structure of bone and metal, shaped like an open flower. The petals were spines. The veins were wires. It pulsed faintly as she approached. Her neural interface lit up, unbidden. A file unlocked itself. Project designation: Cipher origin. Source: Architect Genetic Engine. Epoch pre-singularity. Date: unknown. Content: species encryption. Algorithm. Elena's blood froze. The file opened. Chapter 4. The Architect's Grave, Part 2. The file streamed directly into Elena's neural feed, bypassing conscious thought. She felt it more than read it, the data unraveling in her mind like a wound. Images, sounds, memories that weren't hers. A world of flesh and steel, crumbling beneath a sky of dying stars. A people who were not people, the architects, their forms mutable, biomechanical, incomprehensible. They moved like rivers of light, their thoughts stretching across dimensions Elena couldn't name. They had fought the choir, had burned entire universes trying to contain it. They had failed. The vision seared itself deeper. She saw the architects' last stand, their worlds falling like dominoes, reality itself collapsing under the weight of the choir's song. And their final decision: they would encode themselves into flesh, into something small, something fragile, something that could hold the lock when all else failed. They chose a primitive, irrelevant species, Homo sapiens. They broke their own bodies down into base code and wove it into the human genome. A recursive encryption algorithm buried in every living cell. The Cipher. Elena saw the architects' sacrifice in terrible clarity. Their cities consumed, their gods slain, their names erased. They didn't do it to save themselves. They did it to keep the choir caged. They made humanity into a lock. The data stream ended. Elena fell to her knees, her pulse roaring in her ears. She understood now. The technocracy's obsession with genetic purity, their protocols, their cold sterility. It had been erosion. Each attempt to perfect the genome had chipped away at the lock, until nothing remained. And Surana hadn't broken humanity. She had released them. In the center of the archive, the petrified flower pulsed one last time. A final message unfurled across Elena's neural feed. The lock is open. The choir is awake. Your choice remains. Coordinates flashed in her vision. The Cradle. Chapter 5. The Cradle of Flesh, Part 1. The cradle stood where no map said it should exist, hidden beneath the scarred earth, far beyond the dead sprawl of Prime City, buried deeper than any living citizen of the Helix technocracy had ever known. Elena descended for hours, following winding, crumbling tunnels lined with bone-white conduit cables and half-collapsed bulkheads. The further she went, the more the architecture changed. Sterile technocracy alloys gave way to something older, something alive. The walls pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips. They were warm, breathing. The final chamber opened like a wound, a cavern the size of a city, lit by the dim, soft glow of hundreds of thousands of gestation pods suspended from the ceiling like inverted lilies. Each pod pulsed faintly, cradling the form of a developing embryo, the future of humanity, or what was left of it. Surana's voice cracked across Elena's neural feed one last time, fractured, ghostly. The choir's recursion will end, but nothing human will remain. Elena walked slowly through the chamber, her eyes darting to the readouts embedded in each pod's frame. None of the embryos were pure. Each genome pulsed with something else, a fractal signature. The Cipher's echo. The choir's infection lingered in their bones, their nerves, their minds. The cradle had preserved them, but it had also transformed them. A central platform waited at the far end of the chamber, a control dais, its interface shimmering faintly, still alive after centuries. A single file waited, blinking. Execute. Reverse cipher. Below it, a warning. Outcome. Choir recursion collapse. Complete dissolution of human genomic structure. Membrane breach. Etheric system collapse. Emergence of alternate cycle. Elena stood over the console, her breath shallow. The choice was hers. Chapter 5. The Cradle of Flesh, Part 2. The console hummed faintly beneath Eleanor's trembling hands, the prompt pulsing in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Execute, reverse, cipher, Y or N. The choice hung there like a knife. For a long moment she stood frozen, staring at the rows upon rows of gestation pods stretching into the dark, each one glowing faintly with the pulse of something not quite human. She thought of Prime City, now a garden of flesh. She thought of the choir's song still thrumming in the back of her skull, soft and seductive. She thought of the sacrifice the architects had made. And then Surana's voice spoke one last time, clear and steady in her neural feed. I wasn't trying to save humanity. I was trying to free it. The lock was never built to protect them. It was built to protect the universe from them. You can end the recursion, but the cost is everything. The cradle will remain, but what comes after will not be us. Elena closed her eyes. For the first time since the Cipher's song began, she understood. This wasn't about survival. It was about ending the cycle, even if it meant burning the species down to its roots. Her finger hovered over the console. She exhaled and pressed Y. The chamber shuddered. The air grew heavy. A low, resonant sound began to rise. Not the choir's song, but something deeper, older, more final. The Reverse Cipher. Chapter 6, The Fractured Sky, Part 1. The sky broke. Elena stood at the edge of the cradle's upper platform, watching as the first cracks appeared in the heavens above. Thin, jagged lines of darkness splitting the pale green clouds. The reverse cipher worked fast, far faster than she had imagined. The earth beneath her feet trembled, as if something vast and buried shifted in its sleep. The choir's song, once omnipresent in her mind, began to falter, notes bending, distorting, unraveling. Across the horizon, the landscape collapsed in slow, graceful spirals. Entire sectors of Prime City folded inward, pulled apart like paper, the fused masses of blissed citizens dissolving into ash. The sky bled. The atmosphere itself peeled back in fractal layers, revealing a void beyond, not space, not darkness, but something else. The membrane. Elena fell to her knees as the reverse cipher reached its apex, her body trembling violently. She could feel herself coming undone, her bones humming, her skin sloughing away in molecular cascades. Her neural interface blinked wild error codes. Her heartbeat staggered, fading. She had known it would cost her everything, but she hadn't expected to feel herself disintegrate so slowly, so thoroughly. In her fading vision, she saw the embryos in the cradle begin to stir. The reverse cipher didn't touch them. They remained. Altered, corrupted. A new kind of humanity. One that would awaken in a world unrecognizable. One that would carry the scars of the choir's recursion. As her vision darkened, Sorana's voice whispered faintly in her skull, "This is not the end. This is the seed." Chapter 6, The Fractured Sky, Part 2. The sky fell inward. The last pieces of Prime City folded like collapsing lungs, the towers and spires consumed by the gravitational churn of the reverse cipher's collapse. The laws of physics fractured like brittle glass. Above, the sun split in half. Elena's body was almost gone, her skin reduced to filaments of light, her breath nothing but static in her ears. Her consciousness teetered at the edge, scattered across unraveling neural patterns. She watched as the sky peeled away, revealing the impossible. Beyond the crumbling stars lay an incomprehensible maw. 3 distant suns arranged in a triangle, burned coldly against a backdrop of unfamiliar constellations. A membrane of shimmering green light stretched across the horizon, rippling as the cipher's recursion collapsed inward, dragging what remained of Earth into its gravitational wound. In the final seconds before her mind dissolved, Elena understood. The reverse cipher hadn't saved anything. It had relocated the wound. Earth was no longer part of the universe it had once inhabited. It had become something else. A fractured, corrupted world orbiting within the unstable membrane of that giant's maw. The choir was gone, but its scars remained, etched into the bones of the world. The last thing Elena saw was the cradle, still intact, still pulsing, its millions of gestation pods beginning to open. The next generation was already awakening, and they would not be what once was considered human. Chapter 7. The Fall. Part 1. The cradle remained. Above its broken shell, the sky no longer held stars. Only the 3 unfamiliar suns of the wherever she was burned cold and distant, casting pale green and violet shadows across the ruptured landscape. The earth itself had changed. Mountains split open like old wounds. Rivers ran with silver ichor. Forests of bone and sinew twisted skyward, whispering to themselves in a language no living thing could understand. The choir's recursion was broken, but its residue remained. A new Earth had been born from the ashes of old Earth, a malformed echo of the world that came before. Deep within the cradle, the gestation pods opened one by one. The embryos within did not emerge screaming. They did not cry, they simply stood. Their skin was marked by patterns that resembled fractals, veins of shifting color moving beneath their flesh. Their eyes were too large, their minds already fragmented. They were not fully human, they were something new. The choir's fingerprints pressed gently into their bones. And elsewhere, across the newly formed surface of the planet they occupied, others began to wake. Those who had survived the collapse, no longer fully human, their bodies and minds twisted into new subspecies, fractured echoes of a species that had once been singular. Some emerged slender and sharp-eyed, their senses attuned to the folds of the reality of this new world, the first of the tall folk. Others crawled from the wreckage, their bodies squat, dense, resilient. The first of the half-folk, the genetically divergent, the failed attempts at purity, the byproducts of generations of technocracy experimentation, now called mutants, and scattered among them, hidden in the corners of the world. The half-folk, smaller, quick, fragments of human memory clinging to their bones like moss. The children of Oblivion, all of them. Chapter 7. The Fall, Part 2. Above them, the stars whispered. The membrane of this new sky trembled faintly, like the surface of a pond disturbed by something vast beneath. The fracture was permanent. The choir was gone. But something older had stirred. The cradle's final systems powered down one by one, their sterile white lights fading into the green gloom of New Earth's sky. Somewhere in the buried depths of its framework, deep beneath the gestation chambers, a last fragment of Serana's consciousness flickered. A ghost, encoded in static. Her voice spoke only once more, to no one and everyone. "I broke the lock!" I silenced the choir, but the fracture cannot be undone. This is not salvation, this is not mercy. This is the beginning of something worse. Outside the cradle, the landscape shifted endlessly. The first generations of the new Earth's denizens began to spread, unaware of what had birthed them, their existence a byproduct of sacrifice and recursion. The laws of reality bent subtly around them. Time folded unpredictably in distant valleys. The boundary between dreams and waking blurred. Some nights the ground whispered their names. They built, they hunted, they warred, they forgot. But the fracture remained, and beneath the soil, something vast and alien pulsed faintly. Waiting. Chapter 8, The Soundless Void, Part 1. New Earth hung alone beneath its trinary suns, a malformed world adrift in the vast membrane of that new Earth. Time had unraveled. Civilizations rose and fell like waves on a shore. Mountains bled. Rivers changed course overnight. Forests dreamed themselves into existence. The remnants of the choir's recursion still pulsed faintly in every living thing. But the song was silent. For now. Beneath the shattered crust of the world, in the deepest fault lines that marked where Earth's bones had broken, something ancient began to stir. The architect's fail-safes had never fully deactivated. Buried deep within the substructure of reality, encoded not in data or biology, but in the fabric of space itself, one final fragment of the pre-collapse order waited. A last line of defense, or perhaps something far more alien. It emerged first as a ripple in the sky, a shudder felt only by those who dreamed too deeply, by prophets and madmen who clawed at their own faces in the night, whispering of wings and eyes. A shadow in the pulse of the membrane, a thing older than memory. The Elder Ones. Chapter 8, The Soundless Void, Part 2. The rupture formed in the wastelands where nothing had walked in centuries. A tear in the air itself, invisible to the eye but screaming across the neural frequencies of every living thing. Even the trees twisted toward it, their roots pulling back as if in fear. The tear widened and something stepped through. It did not walk. It unfolded, a being of impossible geometry, its form modular and shifting, wings like fractal lattices stretching outward, black as void, tipped with slivers of iridescent bone. Its body was a colony, thousands of organisms moving in perfect, terrifying unity, each piece pulsing in time with the membrane's rhythm. Its eyes, hundreds, layered, blinking asynchronously, scanned the broken world before it. The first of what would be known as the Vinruven, a child of the architects, the failsafe, the last fragment of something older than the choir, older than humanity, older than the universe that had once been. It moved without sound. Where it passed, the earth trembled, reality flexing around it like stretched cloth. It did not look at the new races crawling across the landscape. They were irrelevant. The Vinruven had come for something deeper, something buried, the fracture at the heart of ether, the new earth. As the sun set, casting long green shadows over the horizon, the Vinruven raised its wings and whispered a soundless phrase into the bleeding sky. The lock is gone. The choir is silenced. But the garden still rots. It vanished. Beneath the soil, far beneath the sleeping cities and growing forests of ether, something vast shifted in its slumber. Not dead, not gone, only waiting.